The Hunter. It was a crisp autumn day when Chris ventured deep into the woods, the fallen leaves crunching beneath his boots. The air was cool, and the trees, dressed in vibrant shades of red and orange, created a serene backdrop for his hunting trip. Chris had been tracking a deer since sunrise, the thrill of the hunt keeping him focused as he followed the trail toward a familiar creek. He reached the water's edge and paused, kneeling down to refill his canteen. The creek ran swift and cold, glistening under the late afternoon sun. As he took a drink, something in the distance caught his eye. Movement on the other side of the creek. At first, Chris thought it might be a deer or a bear, but as he squinted, he realized it was something else entirely. Emerging from the trees across the creek was a figure, tall, broad, and covered in thick, tangled hair. It walked upright like a man, but its form was wrong. Its limbs were too long, its posture too hunched, and its muscles bulged unnaturally beneath the fur. The creature looked humanoid, but no human or animal looked like this. Chris froze, his breath catching in his throat. He watched in disbelief as the creature lumbered toward the creek, moving with surprising agility for something its size. It stepped into the shallow water, its large clawed feet making soft splashes as it crossed. The creature's head turned from side to side as if scanning the area, its small dark eyes glinting in the fading sunlight. Chris instinctively reached for his rifle, but something stopped him. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't acting like a predator or a threat. It moved almost cautiously, as if it didn't belong there, as if it were lost. But the sight of it, its sheer size, the strange proportions of its body, sent a chill through Chris. He'd been hunting in these woods for years, and he knew every creature that lived here. But this was something new, something wrong. As the creature neared the middle of the creek, Chris could see more details. Its fur was patchy in places, revealing mottled, grayish skin underneath. Its face, while mostly obscured by hair, had features that were disturbingly human. Small eyes set deep in a broad, flat face, a short nose, and a mouth that hung open slightly as it breathed heavily. Its ears were large and pointed, twitching at the slightest sound, but it was its size that truly unnerved Chris. The creature stood well over 7 feet tall, its massive arms swinging by its sides, its back hunched with what looked like pure muscle. Chris felt a wave of unease wash over him. He had heard rumors before, wild stories from other hunters about strange things seen in the woods, creatures that didn't fit the description of any known animal, but he had never believed them, until now. Suddenly the creature stopped, its body going rigid. It turned its head sharply toward Chris, its dark eyes locking onto him. For a moment, neither moved. The air seemed to grow heavy, the forest falling eerily silent around them. Chris's hand gripped his rifle tightly, his heart pounding in his chest, but he didn't raise it. He wasn't sure if this thing was dangerous, and something deep in his gut told him not to provoke it. The creature stared at him for what felt like an eternity, its chest rising and falling with each slow, deliberate breath. Then, with a low, guttural grunt, it turned away, continuing its slow march across the creek. Chris watched as it disappeared into the trees on the other side, its massive form vanishing into the dense foliage as if it had never been there. Chris remained frozen in place, trying to process what he had just seen. His mind raced with questions. What was that thing? Where had it come from? How could something like that exist without anyone knowing about it? Unbeknownst to Chris, only miles away, chaos was unfolding at a top-secret military complex. The alarms had been blaring for hours, and soldiers were combing through the area, searching for something or someone that had escaped. Behind heavily secured walls, government scientists and military personnel were scrambling to cover up what had just happened. The creature Chris had seen was no ordinary animal. It was the result of years of experimentation, a being engineered in a lab, a hybrid of human and animal DNA. It had been designed for combat, for survival in the most extreme conditions. But something had gone wrong, and it had broken free, fleeing the facility and into the nearby forest. Chris, unaware of the full extent of the nightmare he had just witnessed, made his way back to his truck, his mind still reeling. He didn't tell anyone about what he saw that day, knowing it would sound too unbelievable. But he also knew he would never forget the sight of that creature, crossing the creek like a ghost out of some terrible dream. As he drove away from the woods, Chris couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was still out there, somewhere in the forest, hiding.